Mixing with Mike, plugin of the week is the Plugin Alliance Ampeg B-15N. If you are a universal audio user, you may already have this plugin. If you are not, then this is a hugely welcome addition to the native world. And so Plugin Alliance has brought this out to native users on their platform, and this is one of my favorite bass amps ever. In terms of reamp emulations, this and the SVT emulations that they do are easily my favorites. Bass amps are very difficult to do. I think all amps are very difficult to do, but they did a really amazing job, in my opinion, with this. So what you have here essentially is two complete amps, a 1964 edition and a 1966 edition. And really, while they called it the B-15N, there were variations of that. There was a B-50, the B-15NA, and B, and C, and F, and NC and NF are the two different versions of this. And they have a slightly different tonal coloration to them. So what you're seeing here is the effects rack. So when you normally boot it up, you won't see this. You get the settings. So you basically have two separate amps. They split right here. So you have a volume, treble, and bass control. Volume, treble, and bass control for the 66 channel, and which, depending upon which input you plug into, will determine which one that you're using. So if you plug in here, it gives you the 1964 channel. Here, it gives you the 66 channel. And then if you plug into the lower input, the second input, this will take away 15 dB from the input. So you'll get it at lower level. So if you have something that's really high level coming in, this would be a way of bringing it in without overloading it. Now, one of the cool things that they've done here with this is that there are two different biasing characteristics that you can get with this. So in the 1964 edition, it was actually a 25-watt amp. The 66 edition was a 30-watt amp. The bias on the 64 is a cathode bias, and the 1966 is a fixed bias. So two different ways of applying the bias current. That was emulated here as well. So what's cool is you can kind of mix and match. You can use the 64 with the 66 bias and kind of do the comparisons here to see what it is that you like. In terms of the treble and bass controls, they occupy the same frequencies. So when you work with the treble, it's always 5K. And then the only difference is the amount of boost that you get with one over the other. So you get plus minus 18 on the 64 channel, plus 18 but minus 30 on the 66 channel. And when you go to the bass frequency, they're both 40 hertz as a boost. Now these are Baxandall EQs, so they're pretty broad, musical EQs, because the Q is like very, very soft. You get very much like a tilt kind of characteristic. The Baxandall EQ, if you're not familiar, is basically what was the essence of bass and treble controls on people's stereo systems. That was essentially the makeup of it. And it's a long story about how that was actually came to be, which is worth taking a look at, and we'll get into it here. Okay, so on the bass circuit, again, you get plus minus 10 here, plus minus 11 here, so not really much of a difference on that end. So you got the bias circuits, you got the input with a different gain, you got the gain here, so you can drive this, pull the volume up if you want to overdrive the preamp circuit. That's how you can basically drive a bit more signal into it. When you hit the effects rack up here, it opens up a whole series of settings. So you have a noise gate that's placed in here, and there are some preset settings. It also comes with a filter, which you could turn on or off. So the noise gate will allow you to just gate any noise, rumble, etc. going in. And here, when you apply this, which is a high pass and a low pass filter, the tight allows you to tighten up the low end and apply it in preamplifier. So that would be like applying the EQ to the signal before it goes into the amp circuit, or post, which would be after the amp circuit. So those are two different sounds. It comes in default as a post set at 30 hertz. You be the judge, but just be aware that it's there. There's also a smooth, which is up on the top end, which again can be post the amplifier, or preamplifier, so going into the actual amp, and it defaults as post. So these default is on. Again, you could take them off just by popping them out, and you can pop them in or out individually. I'll just kind of leave them in because I don't normally adjust them, so we'll just kind of leave it in as is. The input gain here allows you to basically just feed more signal into the input to drive it farther. So that's just one way to do that. The power soak is very important. So the power soaks are used as a way of absorbing the output voltage of the amplifier uh, to put a load on it. It allows you to run speakers that can be overdriven at a lower volume. That's the basic functionality of it. It can also be used if you're just trying to take some kind of a direct out, get no sound acoustically, and not blow up your amplifier, especially an amplifier like this. So obviously this is a digital representation. You can do whatever the hell you want, but the power soak is here. So you'll adjust the output just to kind of calibrate or balance so you have more or less unity gain, and you can judge the tonal character accordingly. Now, we have a horn. Now, there was actually a horn cabinet. It was actually on the SVT 8x10. So it had 8 10-inch speakers and a horn element, a piezo horn element. And so when you pop that in, you can add that in if you want a little bit more definition in the highs. So that was there just to make it a little bit punchier. And then you have a whole 43, actually 42 mic'd up, and then an empty cabinet play. So I guess this is just giving you the output of the amplifier sampled without any speaker or microphone set up. So what you'll have here is you'll see the speakers, the original B-15 cabinet that this would come with, but it also could feed into 8x10, like I was just telling you about, 1x15. I guess these are variations of that same. The 4x10, which is another variation of it, and then obviously the empty one. And you get a variety of different microphones. So what Dirk has done here with this, or Brainworks has done here, and Dirk is the one who put all this together, with all the different miking things, is to really give you a whole set of different tonal characters that you can use. So you could just kind of toggle through them. And normally what I'll do is, the soak usually comes in at like -3. I usually pull it around to like around -8 or 9 because that gives me closer to unity gain without adjusting any of the settings here. But whatever the cabinet setup here, I may start just by going between these two first. I generally stay off the treble and bass controls initially, but usually what I'll do is I'll try to find a tone and then switch between the two of them and see if there's like a subtle characteristic. One will give a bit more mid-range. I think it's the 66. One will give you a bit more warmth and top end. So let's just have a listen here just real quick. Let's listen to the bass as is. Hold on. I think I may need to move to a section where this all works. Okay, here we go. So obviously there's a lot more gain here on this one. In this particular case, may have something to do with the input source. So you hear the more body and warmth here and the more mid-range presence here. So we could switch between the two and then also switch the bias circuits here. So you get a subtle tone variation. Let's go with this setting and see how we make out. So I'll just do a quick adjustment on the treble bass, just so you get a sense of what that's all about. Now, of course, as you toggle through the different amp settings, you're going to get a whole variety of different tones, so you may make different adjustments as you kind of go along. But you can really hear like the richness and warmth that it brings in, just with the EQ. on that end, and I could obviously go to the warmer sound just right here. All right, so I'm going to stay here with the 1966 and go with this setup and this EQ. The Baxandall EQ also, even though like these boosts seem like radical, but like in terms of the way the smoothness of the EQ itself doesn't make it sound like it's like a radical boost or cut. It seems always very musical, and that's kind of a property of Baxandall EQ. So let's kind of toggle through some different presets here so we can just see. So here we have like an SM57 with EQ, or actually two SM57s, and you see there's like all different kinds of, oh sorry, no EQ. Then there's one with EQ, a 563, a 52, which I think is a Shure mic, and then et cetera, et cetera. That was like a D112, so we'll go through all of these, or a D12 maybe. You know what, I'm going to kind of put myself into a better section of the song here. So I'm just picking out some presets here. Let me just kind of skip over here to the 8x10s. All right, so we'll start there. So you can hear like the tonal variations that are built in there. Now let's kind of put it together with the drums. And if you want to really, kind of drive it, give it some growl, we can just do that. Not really the song for that kind of thing, but you get the basic idea. You could drive that, which is also like a classic, like great way of just kind of like overdriving an amp and really making it sound like a guitar. I haven't played around with this a lot on guitar, although I've noticed some things where people have been using this on guitar. And the original B-15 was actually designed for acoustic basses. And the Portaflex was about the portability. So the whole amp head has two clips on the side of the cabinet, on this side and on this side. It's a total of 4 clips. And you pop those off, and you could flip the whole head upside down into the cabinet itself, and then put the clips down, and there would be a handle on top. And most of these had wheels on the bottom, so you could wheel it from studio to studio or gig to gig. When you get to that location, it would protect the amp. You just pop the clips, lift the whole head out, turn it over, plug the output of the amplifier into the cabinet, turn it on, and just go to work. Very, very cool idea. So it's kind of an interesting thing, and it was in studios. Pretty much every studio that I've been in in New York had one of these, and almost every studio just seemed to have one hanging around as like a spare bass amp that people would use. There were even some. I actually worked on a B-18, which I've only seen in a couple of in all of the studios that I've been in, which is also kind of cool. But there were many variations of this bass amp, and really kind of goes back. I think the original one goes all the way back to like 1960 was when it was first created, and then it kind of filled the studios and became a signature sound for so many of the Motown records, and so many records that you've heard. You may not even realize that this is an amp that's on there, but this was really a classic, used on so many records, and really absolutely like a must-have plugin if there is one that you need to have in terms of a bass amp. There's nothing else that I've found that's even close, and I'm sure I'll get like a million suggestions here saying, oh, try this, try that, or this is better on the YouTube channel. But aside from that, in my opinion, so far of everything that I've tried, this is blowing away anything, and there's nothing that's even close in terms of a B-15 emulation. So great work by Brainworks, and great news that this one is now available out in native platforms. So plugin of the week, Plugin Alliance Ampeg B-15N, mixing with Mike, plugin of the week.